Today we are going to actually start reading A Midsummer Night's Dream. I feel like we've had enough experience with reading sonnets by now by Shakespeare, between the etymology project I had you do, and creating your own sonnet, and memorizing one of Shakespeare's sonnets as well. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the play. But before we do that, I'm going to give you a tool to kind of help you keep track of a lot of different scenes happening and how those scenes are connected to each other throughout the play, to keep track of the different characters. There's obviously main characters in this play, but there's also a lot of side characters that can get confusing at times as well. So I'm going to give you some symbols that are going to help you keep track of everything that's going on within this play. So the terminology for this is called text coding. And essentially what it's doing is it's leaving different marks that you create that tell you if a passage is important to the plot or a theme, if a main character is important, why maybe different characters have been added into the play, maybe passages that are marked that contribute to the overall plot, or maybe marking something that might be new or interesting to the overall play. So let's get into it. So we're going to start with the first text code symbol, which I have titled as Seems Important. We write it on my board here. So seems important, you can mark with an exclamation point. So basically, you're going to mark any passage that might seem important to the overall theme of the play, to the overall plot. Maybe there is an argument between two characters and you think it might be important later on in the story. You're going to mark that with an exclamation point. That way you know when you go back through, maybe when you're writing an essay or you're going through your double column journals, you'll know that that passage was important to maybe a different scene or conflict that happens later on within the play. So then the next marking will be titled as Raising a Question or Raises a Question. And you are going to use a question mark as the symbol for that. Kind of obvious to use a question mark for raises a question. But basically, if there is a passage that you're confused about and you're wondering, well, why is this passage here within the story, put a question mark by it. If you're wondering, well, why did these two characters get in an argument over this, put a question mark by it. Maybe you'll get that answer later on in the book. Or maybe if you foreshadow something like, well, maybe I think that this character is going to either get killed off, or they're going to fall in love, or they're going to get in an argument with another character later on. You're going to put maybe a question mark by it and maybe make a prediction about it. Also, maybe if you see some new characters come in, you could put a question mark as to, okay, why is this character getting introduced now? Are they even going to be important later on? Put a question mark by it. So that's what raises a question is used for. You could even mark if there are certain laws that are being introduced within the play, which we're going to go over the Bronze Age and the Elizabethan area to kind of answer some of those questions about why certain marriage laws are put in place within the first act that we're about to read. But you can put a question mark by maybe certain laws and stuff they have questions about within the story. There's some folklore as well, so you can always put a question mark by that too. So that raises a question. So then the next symbol is titled as Something That Is New or Interesting. And this, I don't know if you call them hashtag or a number sign. I call it a pound sign. You're going to mark it with pound sign. So if you see that a new character is being introduced, you might question why they're being introduced, but you also might put a pound mark by it and say, well, this is a new character. I need to remember that this is a new character. I'm going to put a pound sign by it. If you see a passage that is interesting that maybe, like, for example, there are fairies in this play, it's not going to spoil anything that's going to happen, but there are fairies in it. You might question, like, why are these fairies doing this one thing, or there's a certain spell that they're doing. I'm going to put a pound sign by it because that seems interesting to the overall theme. That seems interesting. That might be what is happening later on in the story. So you can put a pound sign by it. Or if you just see a conflict or something that you find interesting as well, maybe you don't know if it's important or not, you can still put a pound sign by it. So that is that sign. So these next two symbols, they kind of go hand in hand together. Obviously, all these symbols go hand in hand together. You don't have to like individually mark each one as, well, this can only be something that's new, or this can only be something that's important, or this is only something I have a question about. They're meant to work together to answer questions that you have about the overall plot of the story, or what's going on with characters, or the theme of the play. But if you do have a question about, like, well, is this character gonna get killed off, or is this character gonna fall in love, are these two characters gonna get into a fight, that's technically a prediction you're making. You're technically using foreshadowing with context clues. So I have two markings for confirms a prediction or contradicts a prediction. So if it confirms a prediction that you made, you're going to put a giant yes mark to the scene or the passage that confirms a prediction you made. So let's say with Romeo and Juliet, because we've read this already, and we know what happens to Romeo and Juliet. You thought that Juliet was going to die from actually drinking the potion. She takes the poison and you confirm that she's actually going to die. So you would put a yes next to the scene that confirms that she's dying within Romeo and Juliet, because you made the prediction earlier on by putting a question mark or a pound sign or an exclamation point by an important passage that made you think, okay, I think that Juliet is going to die because of X, Y, and Z. So you're going to put a yes mark by that passage. And then there is contradicts prediction. And with contradicts a prediction, you are going to mark that with a giant no. So let's say you marked a passage that made you think that Romeo was still going to live after everything that happened. You thought, okay, he might be sad about Juliet dying, but I don't think he would do anything drastic to his life to end it. And then he does. So then that would be a giant no. I was wrong about that foreshadowing, but at least I tried to make a good guess about it. So you'll just put a giant no as to trying to make that kind of prediction or foreshadowing. So those are the main symbols that you can use whenever you're coding your text. But there's also another thing I want you to think about as well. So if you see a word or phrase that is repeating itself, I can't write and talk at the same time for some reason. So like if a word or phrase either repeats itself, seems important, or you don't know what it means, going to circle that word or phrase. So if you see the same word getting repeated multiple times, or maybe a phrase getting repeated multiple times throughout the story, guess what? It's probably important at some point. So you're going to probably want to circle it. If you think it's important, even if it doesn't repeat itself multiple times, circle it. If you don't know what it means, circle it, because you can look it up later on. Or you can ask me and I can try and answer it for you as well. But if you don't know what it is, or it repeats itself, or seems important, circle the word or phrase, because it could be important later on to the plot or the theme or what's going on between characters. So, now you're probably wondering, okay, if we're doing double column journals and writing our passages down that we think are important to what's happening between characters or the overall play itself, why are we using text coding symbols? Because the play is a 5-act play. There's a lot of different scenes, there are a lot of different characters, there's a lot of different things going on. Your double column journals are not enough in covering what is happening within the play. So you need these symbols to also make marks, because you're not going to be able to mark every single thing that is happening within your double column journals. So this is just going to aid you in keeping track of things that might be important for projects that you do later on with the play. It also just makes it a lot easier to keep track of just what is going on in general. And you're probably wondering as well, okay, this is important in English class, how can I use it outside of the classroom? So basically outside of the classroom, someday when you're big old good adults outside of high school, you might be looking at like a contract or a legal document, or even in your own job, maybe just reading over a paper or whatever you need to. You're going to want to mark up places that are important on it. So this is teaching you how to look for different pieces of information that seem important to you, and making sure that you know how to remember it and keep track of it in a very organized way. So with that being said, we're going to move on to starting A Midsummer Night's Dream. So what I'm going to have you do is, in class we're going to read Act 1, Scene 1 together. But here's how this is going to work. I'm going to have you guys divide into groups. Since there's about 25 of you, maybe like 5 different groups of 5 people. I know that seems kind of big, but what is going to happen is, for the remaining time in class, you guys are going to individually in your own groups. You're not going to read out loud together, but on your own in your groups, you're going to read through Act 1, Scene 1 together. And then you're going to use the text coding symbols. And I'm going to hand out this worksheet to you guys. Well, not worksheet, but this kind of pamphlet, so you can use it as a guide to make your markings as you need to. But you're going to use this and you're going to mark lightly with a pencil. Please do not use a pen. If you need a pencil, please ask me. Lightly with a pencil on the side, mark things that you think are important using your text coding symbols. And then when you guys are all done reading, it really won't take long, because Act 1, Scene 1 is really, really short. You're going to talk about what you marked and why you marked it a certain way with your text coding symbols. And then whatever time we have left in class, we're going to discuss why we mark certain things. Did we all mark kind of the same things with the same symbols, or did everyone mark something completely differently than each other?